Of you. My name is Anna Guida. I work at Fourth on the Access to Charging team and am leading the Charge at Home project with some of my peers on the call here. We're super excited to have you all here for our third roundtable session. These are monthly kind of discussions, conversations, presentations we have together with folks in the EV charging space for multifamily properties to kind of just broaden the conversation and bring people together to learn about EV charging in multifamily properties. We're super excited today to have Amy Hillman joining us as our presenter for this session. And a bit of housekeeping, we have a pre-answered or pre-submitted Q&A that we'll get into after Amy's presentation, and then we'll move into a live Q&A. So throughout, if you have any questions that come up, drop them in the chat, and we will address those. So yes, we have these every month, like I said. We'll drop Stuart, who I work with, drop in the chat some links to learn more about the project and to sign up for future sessions. So there we go. So before we get started, I want to introduce you to our wonderful presenter, Amy Hillman. Amy Hillman is the CRO at OpConnect, where she leads efforts to deploy EV charging infrastructure across private and public fleets, multifamily communities, and workplaces. A veteran of the industry, Amy began her work in EV charging with Octotally in 2011. Amy holds an MBA from Presidio Graduate School, and Amy also served on the board of Fourth for 9 years as the board chair. So thank you, Amy, so much for being here. And yeah, I'll pass it off to you now.
Hi there all, and welcome to this multifamily roundtable. We definitely want it to be collaborative. I thank Fourth for doing this. When I started in charging in 2011, we'd go to conferences and we'd talk about multifamily charging. And now we go to conferences and we talk about multifamily charging and how to solve it. There is no great solution, which is why we'll have some case studies today. What we'd like to talk about today is why EV charging at multifamily properties, new build, some considerations, existing property considerations are very different. New build, as you may know and imagine, is easier because it can be cost neutral or more cost neutral. And existing property at multifamily can be really cost prohibitive. I have some case studies of new build examples, different ones I tried to pick from across the country and how we skinned that cat, and also existing, which is more interesting how we skin the cat, and FAQs and hurdles and Q&A. So next slide. So why EV charging at multifamily? Charging, one reason is apartments and condos, but apartments, both, you can attract tenants. It became, in the early days, we would say, if you're the only apartment or condo in San Francisco with charging available, you're going to get the tenant. So that is it was often more the opportunity cost for not having it. Seattle, we used to call it Tesla CEOs cities. Tesla CEO cities were Seattle and San Francisco. And if you had a high-end apartment building without charging, you would lose possible tenants. People do call ahead to find out if there's charging available. So I did just have one. We have a large multifamily customer, apartments in New Jersey, who puts in charging at all of their units. They have very good rebates and incentives right now. And I had a driver got me on the phone. They Googled, the charging company. The lease office knew nothing about the charging, could not answer him how much it costs to charge. Wasn't interested. They are offering it just mostly because there's great incentives. And that person needed a spot with charging, and they needed to know what the rates were and the policies were. Was it time limited, et cetera? So they were not going to lease from somewhere that didn't have charging. There are potentials for revenue. I wouldn't say it's a profit center. I wouldn't say it's a profit center ever. I would say it can pay back. It's an infrastructure investment. And If there's incentives, it might be profitable. Let's go on to the next slide. Other goals, why EV charging is sustainability goals. So I noticed, can you go back, Anna? So the one reason I actually redid these in order. So the thing is that most people get it because they need it. They need it to get tenants, to serve future tenants or residents, or existing tenants or residents. That's the number one. They have to do it. It's like bike storage. You know, they have to do it. People have to have safe bikes or they can't live there in some cities. The other is revenue potential. Now go back to the next slide. Of lesser import to me, I'm a sustainability professional. I love sustainability. I've been in it for my entire career pretty much. And there are some properties who have sustainability goals. It's a kind of a tertiary goal. Increasing EV adoption. I don't know a ton of multifamily properties that are doing it, but that's an altruistic thought that that's one of their goals. And future proofing. One thing they do, so if I was moving them, I'd move future proofing above those if they were in order. They can avoid costly retrofits by doing it now. So if it's new build, that's why codes in many cities across America, probably not enough, say if you're building a new apartment building, you need to have some either EV charging at spots and some EV make ready at spots where you've put in the conduit for the future. That would save so much money. So, and it is. Next slide.
Yeah.
So one thing, I kind of wanted a checklist. I guess this is a checklist. There's more items that could be on the checklist. You could go, all day on the checklist. But the first thing is in new build, is there a code? I would put the codes first. Like, is there a requirement? You want to meet the requirement. Maybe it's good at second because, it almost doesn't matter. If you're building new anywhere in the country, even Nebraska, somewhere with pretty low EV adoption, it's a great idea to throw the conduit in because it's really low cost to do so and maybe have the panel available for it. So you want to find out, are there EV station code requirements? Are there make ready requirements? Do you have to have some stations or do you have to have the make ready? Then after figuring out if you're required, what's your utility doing? I tell everyone, who's your utility? Let's go visit the page. You're going to go. And the one thing about multifamily is on most utility pages in the country, it's under commercial. It's not under residential. So it's not quite commercial. It's not quite residential. Sometimes it has its own page, multifamily now, but that's newer. But otherwise it's under commercial. So you look at the utility, are there rebates? One thing, because of this problem of multifamily charging and how to solve it, how to get it in because it's so cost prohibitive, is the utilities are tending to, if they have rebates, to give much larger ones for ports at multifamily, sometimes even up to thousands per port, which is newer. So are there utility rebates? Are there other rebates? I mean, in Oregon where we're sitting, many of us, not all, there's a ODOT community charging rebate that's very lucrative when stacked with utility rebates for multifamily. And that is true across the country. So what are the rebates? Are there codes? So new build, let's say there was no rebates, no codes. I would say put in the conduit. Any builder, try and put it in. This is no problem. It will save you money later. Next slide. So what's the goal? I always ask, business model is kind of the wrong idea, but what's the goal for providing charging? This is what I've trained for years, folks, to ask first. People call all day, every job I've had in EV charging, which is really just 2 companies. What is the goal for providing charging? So multifamily, often they'll just straight up say we have to. 2 they'll say it's cheap now because of the rebates, or we have tenants bugging us. There's current tenants bugging us. That's often a condo comment, like they're really bothering us. So, is the goal, you can get to the bottom of it. Is it a competitive offering to attract tenants? Is it to meet current tenant or resident demands? Is it to meet law or code? The fourth one that I actually hear about a lot is I want to make money. So that one I'm I don't poo-poo it. I just say like, it's not a profit center. I just heard from a CEO of a big long-term EV manufacturing company, and that CEO says, if you want to make money, don't put in chargers, put in ATMs. So that's that's not all use cases. Some make money, but to have it be a profit center is not a goal that should be the only goal for multifamily. How does the parking work? So this is a really good second question. So what's the goal? Hopefully they have one goal, and it's we need the chargers for our residents, period. Or it's, we have two EV drivers that are really wanting us to put them in, and we have to talk to them about it. Then how does the parking work? So this is, believe it or not, there's not just, you probably know if you're here, there's not just dedicated parking where you have a deeded spot or an assigned spot with your apartment, or first come, first serve where it's open, wherever you park, you park. There are a few other considerations of how the parking works, but if you're thinking about charging, you need to know this. And if there's changes, I had a condo in Vancouver, Washington, where they had neither of these. They had, it was condos, so they owned their buildings. They did get a spot. The spots were assigned, but they could be moved. And there was more like a social acceptance of, you're not taking them from their spot that they've had for 20 years. They're not going to move, but will they, what they want EV charging? I mean, took more than 2 years to figure that part out. So, and that happens in apartments too. We have quite a few apartments right now where it's kind of officially open parking, but it's not. Next slide. I spent too much time on that, but I can't tell you how much time it could save by asking that ahead. So existing building overview. This is more expensive. Are there utility incentives, rebates, or other? And do you have an electrician? Do you have as-built drawings? Is there a evaluation of the existing power at the building? So a lot of times I just had someone with a quote older building call and say, and so I got on Google Earth, looked at it, and I said, well, what do you mean older? Can you send me pictures of the panel? Can you send me pictures of where you want the spot to be? So you can do a cursory kind of look at a panel, but it's great if I always ask, do you have an electrician? Have they been out there? What do they say about your power? Do you know if you have spare breakers in your panel? Do you know do people say, oh, we're not going to be able to do that. We don't have a lot of power. So just kind of getting an idea. Obviously, if there's not enough power, a service upgrade may be required, or utilizing the existing power with energy management, but you got to know where you're at. Next slide. So I did pull some case studies. This is for new build, and this is for a Texas new build site. This was very interesting to me. It was a while ago. Because it was new build, I don't think it was code. It was just like we're going to do this because this is coming, right? This is coming. We're building a new building. We're going to put in 32 chargers, right? And there they've sat. I love this. These aren't their real names, but we put them in. They put them in. We sold them chargers, 32 of them. They are networkable. They can charge for charging. I think they're going to have, if you lease an apartment, you get a spot. And if you want a spot with a EV charger, I think they're going to charge them. This is another thing under the what's your goal. They are going to charge them like a monthly amount. Let's say it's $100 a month for the spot and then for the power cost. So that's a common thing, not the most common, but that's a common thing. And so they are just sitting there. Maybe they went in a year ago. So they're not really being utilized. We love that data for this year. None. That's fine. They're not unhappy. This was their goal. We're going to put them in ahead. Would I have done that without incentives? Maybe not. I don't mind. It's a fine idea. Next slide. Not the best case study, but kind of starting from zero. Put them in and wait. I've had people wait years and then get full. So I've had people put in, 4 chargers, not 32, but 4. So this is a spot in Oregon where there were utility rebates. It was new build. They started it with 10. They started getting a quote from more expensive stations. It is open air. I don't think I said this. This is about whether or not and how to put in at multifamily. One thing to think about is cellular signal, if there's cellular or Wi-Fi. So this spot happened to be, the garage is kind of open air. So we knew there was good cell signal. It's in a more urban area. And they were like, we're just gonna get 10. It's new build. And they were getting a quote for a more expensive station. And I was kind of like, well, it's undercover. It's undercover, but still has cell signal, because it's like got a roof, but some half walls. And I said, why don't you get this less expensive station? The rebates will like pretty much fully cover this, because you get the multifamily rebate, which is more, the station is less, and your install's almost nil because you're a new build. And they're like, great. So they got it pretty much all covered by the rebates. They put in 10, and the usage was, these went in more than a year ago, but there's the usage, just for this year. I have to tell you, even though I say you shouldn't do it for profit, they're charging maybe, it's, Oregon has pretty cheap power. I don't know what they're charging, but let's say it's 20 cents a kilowatt hour. That's more. They're kind of, hopefully they're putting a capital reserve for future equipment or additions, because it shouldn't really be profit, but they've collected $659 of revenue this year with 177 sessions. And these did sit for a while. So they put in 10 right away. They didn't have tenants. Obviously it was new build, but these are going great. Next slide. Hopefully a totally different case. This is a different case in Washington. They also had rebates, but not very good. Honestly, not lucrative. But they did it. They had to spend a lot more, because Washington had code that you have to do it. They didn't have to buy the stations, all of them, but they did because they suspected they would have the tenants. So they did, but this has, actually, I'm shocked at the usage because this was a slower start too. And now I hadn't really looked at this year, but it's another spot where they're getting some good usage. And these are also a lower cost unit that's undercover. And some of them, I think all of these use the last two examples. The Texas one has one, this is funny, one station, very little energy management. They put it because new build Texas, lots of power, which is ironic because we know they're having power issues. And I don't know where, I don't remember where in Texas, but we hear about the power issues. But this one, I think they're using some energy management, but they have pretty good power. So they're really, the daily average is 55 kilowatt hours. That's amazing. So that's just 3 different use cases of new build, all of them inexpensive to install, some of them nothing to buy, and some of them something to buy. So I'm happy to, Anna, you want me to wait till the end for questions, right?
Yeah, I mean, people can hop in now if you're cool with that. I think there's a
Yeah, I
few.
mean, I feel like this is the end of my new build scenario, and new build shouldn't be that exciting, or we shouldn't have to make a real heavy use case for that. Like, you should do it. Um,
Amy,
but
I have a question for you. So if I'm, on a team that's doing a development, new build, and um, there's some level of code, but all of that code is just requiring fully installed EV chargers, EVSE. Um, what's your process of talking with the engineer team or the development managers to make sure that they understand the value proposition of EV readiness, while also understanding or recognizing that they have financial constraints as well? What's your process on those conversations?
I mean, that is a great question. The thing is, GCs and development companies, when they're building a new building, they're busy. There's a million moving parts that are not, EV charging is not nearly as important as, they have a lot of codes, a lot of things to meet. So they like to pick the lowest, easiest path to get it done, which is, we all appreciate because things are expensive enough. So what I would do is I would want to know, like I would say, if you can get the electrician sub on the phone, And that's what I try to do. I say, hey, could we do a quick meeting with the electrician? Because I literally just say, and a lot of times we get the plans. I've looked at hundreds of plans, and I don't have the computers or the printers for those construction documents. They're huge, but I try and zero in and see how many floors, how many spots, what do the panels look like, so that I can kind of give them a good idea. Is it a good idea if it's floors? Is it a good idea to just have conduit up to the floor and a junction box stub out? Then you can at least bring it over to any spot. I try to help them find the easiest, least effort and expensive, not just expense, but effort, least effort way to be make ready. And a lot of times that junction box to floors and condos, that's real good.
Mhm.
And did I answer your question, Whit?
That
I
was,
would
yeah,
say, yeah, I did have another idea. Floors is what I'm picturing because those are the hardest if they're floors. But if it's not a floor, you just kind of say like, look, just if obviously if there's walls where the stations are going to go, that's better than pedestals. It's much harder for whatever reason, even if it's new build, to lay that conduit under the parking lot and stub it out. But I'm going to try and get them to do it. So I want to get them on with their electrician and say, how much in front of them, how much to add this for make ready for, let's say you have 10 spots in area and 4 spots, there's 40, it's a smaller build, just, or per floor. How much to get, I don't know, 100 or 200 amps of power available over to each of those spots, with conduit. And they might say it adds, at this point, it'll add 4,000 a floor. And they'd be like, oh, okay, let's do that. That's high. That's high on that.
yeah,
That's kind of a long answer, but I'd try to talk to the electrician always.
yeah. Well, and I know we have some electrical engineers on the call as well.
They're
So,
better at it than me.
um,
So a different
so
perspective.
yeah,
Often I'll talk to them, and sometimes on big commercial projects, electrical engineers are definitely needed, but for the charging, sometimes that's the least of it.
totally. But um, yeah, the panel conversation and the stub outs and the adding conduit, I think, is just something that a lot of people don't recognize the full value of it until, you might be 5, 10 years down, down the road. And it's a world of difference in terms of cost to install when you already have conduit there.
It's true. I mean, I started at EV on the EV project for Ecotality in 11 under federal grant program, and we were giving away stations and 80 to 90% of the install. And I have had people pay 50, 60 grand just for the install portion of the same ones I offered them in 11. And I was like, I knew it. So here's the thing. They were right? Like maybe they weren't ready. The stations would become defunct, there's better technology. But the plumbing in this, electricians hate it when you say this, but hate's a strong word. But if the infrastructure is in under the ground, that's most of the cost.
Yeah. I
So
try to emphasize that with all of my conversations. The hard part is getting the electricity to the parking space. The charger is actually pretty straightforward.
yeah.
And I know we've got a lot of EV charging companies and vendors on the call as well. So let's move on to the next
Oh,
section,
great.
if that's okay.
Yeah, totally. Let's do existing, which is way harder. This is interesting. So, this is a condo in Portland, that they did, and they, there's a lot of usage. It's a condo. They had to do, a loading zone scenario where they didn't have parking, there's deeded spots, there's some visitor spots. Often visitor spots is a great place for charging, period, because visitor spots can be, a place you can put it. So this spot, they did this loading zone creative scenario that took a long time to do, and it was very expensive to do it. And it's for the amount of EV drivers, there's not a ton of stations. So that's just an example of condos. Why don't we go to the next slide? So this is another one in Portland, interestingly, but it's apartments. And it, they have a lot of usage. They give it away for free. So that's another policy. Were you planning to charge for charging? We're planning to give it away for free. What's the scenario you're working with? So existing buildings, they had good rebates, period. And so it was that is a great way if you can stack rebate programs. That's one thing I tell people a lot. If the rebates are there, go for it, because they can go away. And I've had years of no rebates, same place, they're looking at it, and then they wait and wait and wait. So a lot of times they say, no, we're not going to do it in this budget, we'll do it next year. And I say, do not count on next year. What we can tell you is we don't know if there will be available. So this one, they went for it. They have some fine usage, just not through the roof, but I think the rebates really covered it. Next one. This is oddly, I guess I did another one. I thought these were different enough. This is at the coast. It's, way out there, low usage, for years, low usage. They were way ahead, didn't really have rebates. But I guess they had one EV driver who was asking years ago, and they went ahead and went in with charging. And now they are starting to get like 1 or 2 drivers who use the stations. Next slide. I think there's going to be a lot to talk about for existing, so why don't I pause to see if there's any questions on existing? Because existing is the expensive one, and I have spent years and years with some customers to get them to charging stations at an existing, where they spend you know, let's say $5,000 for those 2 wall mounted stations with everything for the stations, and then 30 grand to install them. That much run. And not even the furthest run. We have it a lot where condos, individual residents put in their stations. And I had it where a guy called me and said, look, I'm a builder. I know things. I'm a construction person. There's no way this should cost $5,000 to put this $1,000 station in my dedicated spot at my condo. And we just explained the run and showed him the electrician quote, and he did it. He was like, oh, got it. Like there's no way it can cost this much. We get that all the time. And it's really difficult, if there's concrete. And this doesn't even, the use cases that, thank goodness, I'm not seeing as much now, but I did have in San Francisco in a fancy building with floors where you have to X-ray for rebar and all that. When you start to get into that, I start to say, you're probably not doing this. Get them in visitor parking. Let's not get them at their spots. For existing, I see a question. So, Edie, do you have situations where smalling buildings don't have dedicated garage or parking lots, but want to install curbside? Curbside, like in the right of way, Edie, it can be significantly more. I don't know if you're saying in the right of way or if it's just, if they don't have any power over the spot, it's significantly more difficult. They're not going to get, I don't know of cities in America that are just going to give that apartment building, if you will, right away access. But visitor, I always go right to visitor parking. So existing home situations where smaller buildings don't have dedicated garage. One thing I just had in the Bay Area, more like Sacramento, is an apartment building where they have you rent the apartment and you get a dedicated garage with you and 4 of your friends have your neighbors have a garage that the property management can't really access without that thing where they ask for permission, just like your apartment, with 4 spots. So the reason I found it out is I didn't go on the sidewalk, and it had been years, 3 years we worked with them before they got charging in. And I said, can you take a picture of them? I want to see them installed. Do you have pictures? And they're like, no, we'd have to ask for a resident. I was like, what? Can you explain more? And so they told me for the 50th time, like, no, they're garages that they share, and we don't necessarily have access. Yeah, we have, Rachel, load management solutions for existing buildings, for sure. We use it all the time. We can share at the circuit level, at the panel level, And even at the across panels. So we have actually, I should have done this site in Southern California. It's the most sophisticated load management I've ever seen. It didn't take the years. It took, let's say, a year before they went in with, let's say, 50 chargers in a condo, but non-dedicated charging, non-dedicated spots. So you can use, they just happen to have that model. And we're sharing across different panel sizes, different phases, the whole thing. So using load management they did not get a service upgrade. And so one of the concerns is some residents will have almost just a trickle, but they all 50 spots are electrified. So it kind of worked. I hope that answered your question, Rachel. And that's one thing to notice. I mean, I worked somewhere else before, and load management is an evolving process, but you want to ask about your charging solution. Is it only at the circuit level that you can share the power? Because that's not really enough if you're going in with a lot of ports. Actually, Whit and I, before the call, I was talking to someone who was a workplace customer, and they have a 400 amp new panel with 20 ports, and they're sharing at the circuit level, and they're booked because they're giving away for free. They're booked. So there's 10 40 amp circuits, 2 40 amp units on each one, and the drivers are disappointed with the rate because it's only a 208 volt panel. And so Whit and I was just talking with that customer this morning about let's do energy management at the panel level. Let's do some more. Let's get this better for you. I don't know how much it'll help because they're booked, but we're going to talk about it. Any other questions on existing? Existing is harder. Well, the things to think about are idle fees in level 1 versus level 2. I'm going to say something. I love level 1. If you can do a combo, I think if it's new build, especially, Rachel, that's a great question. I always like to think, I mean, I've been deploying and selling charging level 2 smart chargers for a long time. But I like to think if I was a fleet manager or a property manager, facilities manager in multifamily, I think all are great. Do you even need smart chargers? Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. If you want to collect money, sometimes, not even all the time, you need a smart charger. But would I say absolutely everyone needs to have smart chargers and pay these annual fees? No, I wouldn't. So I think level 1 can be great. If I was building a new building, it's hard to account for that money though. I would say altruistically, I wouldn't worry about it, and I'd put a level 1 port in front of every spot. But that's really nice of me, and I'm not the one who's going to pass those costs off. Whit's going to say something.
Yeah, I want to jump on here. I've talked with a lot of people around the nation on this subject, and there does seem to be a pretty strong consensus that if, especially in existing properties, if you only have a limited amount of capacity and you're not going to get a service upgrade, throwing in as many, and you have assigned parking already, it makes the most sense to add even just level 1 chargers, level 1 outlets for residents, and then potentially billing them extra per month on parking fees, or however property management does that. So there's a bunch of different ways of doing it, but it's, access is frankly more important than speed. The vast majority of the time, most people would take slower speed and reliable access over having to, worry about getting to the charger and charging for 4 hours. And yeah, there's a lot to talk about there. But yeah, very big proponents of
Yeah, I love level
low power.
1. Yeah, I mean, level 1, whenever you can help the power situation, and it helps the building too to avoid demand charges. So if you can trickle and take the power more slowly. The problem with level 1, of course, is you can't control when it goes. Let's say there's a peak event, a heat thing, and everyone's drawing power. It's still nominal because it's, kind of derated by the 110 of it. So I like level 1. I think a combo, Rachel. I think if I was doing that, I would have level 2 in visitor or an area, let's say it's new build, I'd do an area where they can go to level 2. Sometimes some areas of the country, very few, DC is a good idea. But as many of you probably know, many people think they want DC all the time. I want DC. And we say like, oh, DC existing buildings. For DC, there's actually a formula for like if whatever the DC costs, it's at 1 to 2x to install. So if the DC is 12 grand, it's going to be, 24 to 48 to 12 to 24, at least I would say. I mean, it's 12 grand to install, 12 to 24 grand to install. So if you get into a higher KWDC and it's 25 grand, it's going to be 25 to 50 to install. So that's when they say, oh, I mean level 2, maybe faster AC. That's one thing I talk about a lot is fast AC. So you can do a higher amperage. Any other questions? So on existing building, I can certainly go into policies that help, FAQs, hurdles. I mean, one thing that same multifamily client of ours in New Jersey who's putting in hundreds of chargers, they use idle fees. New Jersey is busy, it's crowded. I grew up on the East Coast, Maryland. And so they are using idle fees after, not in the middle of the night, but after, I think it's 6 hours of charging with no grace period. I think they do no grace period, but you can do a grace period. They're going to charge you like $5 an hour. Our call center does get calls from this customer saying, I got charged $100. And they're like, yeah, you can't just sit there. It says on your phone, it says on the unit, like you're going to get charged if you sit there. And so that's how a lot of people manage, like, okay, the incentives will cover this. We're existing buildings. This same customer, their new builds, it's easy. They just put them in. They do either what the minimum, what the code says, or like 4 ports. But because they only are having 4 to 8 ports at each spot, they're using idle fees. They want people to move, they want other people to use it, and they put them in visitor. So there's idle fees for charging for after you're done, you're idling, staying in the spot after you're done charging. And there's also a maximum parking time. Like you cannot park here for more than X. So we have both options. Some companies don't, some do. How are properties owners billed for network chargers? I know that this is a common thing. It's like your cell phone, but you're billed annually. There's an annual network fee that enables drivers to see how much power they've gotten, what their charging status is, collect money, see their bills. It lets us collect the money from the folks and mail it to the panel owner. So most companies bill annually in advance. And those rates range all over the place. What I'll tell you is like nobody's making money on it yet. How do property owners or HOAs receive reimbursements? We prefer ACH. I do have that very large, it's funny, that very large deployment in Southern California. Their HOA cannot receive an ACH. They have to get a check. So that happens. So check or ACH works. It can be monthly, it can be quarterly. We work with folks, that's most companies do that. What charging rates should property owners set? So back to that question of what's your goal? So Whit and I talking about that same workplace client, that's not the same, but it is the reason they're full is they're giving it away. It's a municipal entity. So I'm going to say charge the power rate. Let's see what the real demand is for charging at this location before you do idle fees, right? Let's just charge the power rate. You probably shouldn't be giving it away anyways. So before I say the rate, I say, what's your goal? And if they say profitable, I do have an ROI calculator that let's see how much you spend on the stations. Let's see how much the rebates are. Let's see what the annual fees are. We include everything, adoption rate, power rate increases. And here's in year 3, you'll be in the black. And how much will you be in the black? So what are your goals is helps determine what rate they should set. And then I say, let me see your power bill. Let me see an August and a December bill. And then let's see what your real rate is you're paying. And then when you set the rate, I ask them, do you want to include the base rate for your power? I try and talk them out of it. Like you're already paying that base rate. So usually, but it's their goals. So I help them set the power. And then I say, what markup would you like to do? And then one thing I love to do with folks that I really recommend is I shop the other multifamily apartments or condos in the area, and I can shop and see what are they charging, what are your competitors charging. So you want to be at or below this. I have one that they set it like 10 cents above any other. I just don't know why, but whatever. I let them, obviously they can set whatever they want, but if they're asking for my guidance, I'm going to try and have it be competitive, fair, and meet their goals. And you have a project builder tool. Great. What are the electricity costs associated with EV charging? I mean, your panel. Generally, you can run into demand charges. I don't know of any utility off the top of my head that has a special tariff for multifamily. It probably exists. So I would always say, I always say early in the process, especially existing buildings, talk to your utility. So let's find out what the deal is. I'm sure I could keep talking. Is there another slide?
Yeah, so we're going to move into the pre-submitted Q&A now, and then we'll move into just broader Q&A for everything at large that we've talked about. So thank you so much, Amy. That was awesome. You know your stuff, and we're super lucky to have access to you. But yeah, let's move right into the pre-submitted. So thanks for folks. When you register for these sessions, we have a space you can drop a question that we'll answer internally, and then we'll present, and then we'll invite anyone on the call to kind of just like do discussion. But I think we have 2 pre-submitted, so I want to get through those first. So the first question is, what are the biggest challenges for landlords who want to provide home charging for their residents? So this is the internal fourth kind of triaged answer, and then of course Amy can hop in, any of our partners on the call. But Whit, I'm going to pass this back to you.
Yeah, so pretty straightforward. Biggest challenges for landlords that actually want to provide home charging as opposed to being forced to or being asked of it by either tenants or supervisors or above property managers. Just the CapEx being too high. Typically, this is what happens when there's just not that much demand and there's no EVs on site yet, so you don't really know what the actual demand in the area is. And typically you're going to want incentives in that case, or it's just not going to happen yet. However, this is definitely one of those times where you build it, they will come, especially as we get towards the later half of this decade. EV adoption rates around the country and around the world really are spiking. There could be some interesting changes in the next couple of months and year, but it's not really going to slow down that much if it does at all. This is a longer term trend, and obviously each property is a little different. So what makes sense for one property may not make sense for other properties. But understanding your expected utilization is critical to being able to do the math for justifying the costs, justifying the CapEx, and understanding, is this an amenity that tenants in our area are looking for and are willing to stay longer, are willing to pay more for? And typically that's the justification. The chargers themselves may not, be a line item that is super profitable, but if they keep tenants longer, that's the justification that most property owners that understand the subject really well are looking at, are using to justify these frankly longer term expenses. And again, the hard part's getting the power to the parking space. It's not necessarily that charger. And then obviously the 3 and 4 are things we've talked about. And the reason why we have these webinars, we have this website, is making sure that there's access to this knowledge, to case studies, to lots of different areas. And I'll pass it over to Amy if you want to add anything.
No, the caveat I would say is the biggest challenges for landlords who have existing buildings and want to provide it.
Yeah.
That is this new building. It's often the biggest hurdles. They don't know. They just didn't know why would the development company who often sells the property, in some areas of the country, they know to do it, and some they don't. It's not common enough practice across the country to do it. So it's different in new build, but I would say, of course, Whit's right on. The money, why would they spend the money? They can't. They can't rationalize spending the money is the number one.
Next question, Anna.
Yeah. When will used EV support, or when will EV use inventory, support the need for 10% of apartments to have easy to use low cost charging?
So this question is very complex. And I took it in a specific direction. So if the person that said it is on, feel free to correct me. But the way I took it is, when will the EV used inventory support the need for 10% of parking spaces to have EV ready equipment installed at them, and for those chargers to be low cost to the end user. And what I say when people ask me similar questions to this is basically, when do we get to the place where everybody has access to low cost EV charging at their properties? And the answer is when this amenity no longer becomes a differentiating factor for people looking for apartments. My expectation is, in some areas, that will happen by the end of this decade, maybe even sooner. In other areas, it's definitely going to take a lot longer, potentially into the 2040s, even early 2040s. My optimistic guess is by 2036, 2037, the vast majority of locations will have charging, with the exception of the properties that just are so capacity constrained and the costs to upgrade are unjustifiable, or the property is being torn down, demolished in the coming years, in which case you're not gonna make that investment. And additionally, the backup for having charging at multifamily properties is always public charging, or workplace charging, or there's a lot of opportunities, and that's not always the worst situation. That is what I do for my charging, and it's more expensive, and ultimately there is that's one of the end goals. We want to make charging more accessible and cheaper for residents at multifamily properties, because it's frankly difficult to go electric if you don't have home charging. It's very much not impossible. I literally do it every day, but the value is there, and especially for property owners that are looking for opportunities for attracting more tenants, longer staying tenants. This is a really solid pathway to keep those tenants, and EV readiness is really the name of the game for new builds, and for existing properties. I would say, like, load management. And I know I took that all over the place, and there's a lot of words here, but it's going to take a while. It's very dependent on the regional and local market, and it will take time in areas. So part of one of the things that I'm hoping to build over the next month or two is some resources around how to look at the adoption rates in your local area. And I'm very excited for the multifamily industry. There's a lot of major players in the data space in the multifamily industry that will eventually be tracking these sort of numbers, so that they can inform their clients of adoption rates. So that is something I'm excited for. It's one of those things where as this amenity becomes more common, as it becomes more known, the major players will gather data on it and be able to provide multifamily owners, developers, and managers the information they need to make informed decisions that are financially responsible for their investors and such.
Awesome.
Amy, would you add anything to that?
I mean, that's a long thing. I own a used EV. I love them. I think I can't wait. I love that you have a date, 2037. I had no idea. That's great. I'm hopeful. I think used EVs is a great thing. And I know there's been very few used EV incentives nationwide, but wherever they are, I mean, I know someone who works at OpConnect, he got one from Southern California. Added the utility to the used EV rate if you purchase one. And I thought that was fascinating. I haven't seen a lot of that, but I'd love to know wherever they are. And I'm just super excited about used EVs. Yeah, I bet what. He's like, yeah, this is not firm. In 2037, we're gonna have all these.
No.
Thank you,
Great.
Whitney. We have a question. We're in the additional questions section now, but we did have a question that came in from registration last night that I wanted just to read off. And maybe, Varun, you can drop this in the chat for everyone to see. Are there any learnings from charger usage that electric utility companies or city planners should take away?
I wonder if there's anyone from utility here. I mean, we work to provide utility data all over the country for all these rebate programs. The thing you're giving the utility in exchange for the rebate is access to your data. Where do they get it from? They get it directly from your network, your charging network, us. And is there anything they can learn? I mean, energy management, period. I would say that one of the biggest things is that the utility with that data is often, I've had them reach out to customers and say, hey, can we please limit the load? Can you please increase the power, allow for more power during the, off-peak hours and limit it during on-peak? That's one thing, but I really like that our city planner should take away. Right away is hard. I mean, it's, I'd rather hear from a utility though. Is there anyone on?
I didn't see any names,
Yeah, the things I
but
hear them
yeah.
talking about are, I mean, one thing, they look at something going on and they say, some utilities say, let's do a pilot. Let's try, open ADR. This is very, very, let's try utilizing open ADR push signals for peak events to lower the rate. Let's get you on a peak use schedule. Let's make sure, everyone in the territory who's hitting demand charges is on the correct rate schedule, tariff schedule. But it's general. I don't hear it a lot anymore, but ADA talk I heard yesterday, which was shocking. Obviously multifamily, it's easier to meet ADA, and new build it's easier. But I threw that in for city.
There's a couple of things I would add to that. Both from the gathering data on average session, how much energy per session at multifamily, I think is valuable. Making sure incentives line up with reality, I think, is something electric utility companies and specific people that oversee these sorts of incentive programs are starting to become more aware of. That the load management side of charging for existing builds is so critical, and in some ways, I see that as being as or more valuable than the demand response aspects, considering a lot of utilities are moving towards time of use rates. And for city planners, again, that right of way piece is tricky. Portland's been doing a lot of interesting and cool work on that as well. Definitely keep your eyes out on that over the next couple of years, if not even sooner. And then, yeah, for city planning, I guess there's other things, I guess, but that's good for that question.
Yeah, to hit both, very different. Or what utilities and city planners should take away, different things.
Very much so. And actually, this one of my rants, which I will not go into, is fundamentally like housing production and housing is more important than transportation almost always. And so recognizing that if the charging is if the charging is becoming an issue for building units, then we should probably be looking at ways to reduce the requirements for parking requirements or similar things like that. There's ways for us to align with housing production and still have EV charging installed at multifamily properties.
Amazing. Thank you. I have to jump in. We're getting close to end, but if anyone has any other questions, feel free to drop those in the chat and we'll record those if we don't have time to get back to you right now. But I just wanted to quickly, before folks start signing off, kind of go over again, Charge at Home. We provide free electric vehicle charging guidance, tools, and resources. Our website for the multifamily industry, our website is www.chargeathome.org. And we do these roundtables monthly. If you want to get involved, feel free to contact us. I have a contact page here in a bit. Here are some of the resources on our website. You can read through those. I want to thank again Amy so much for being here today. I had a lot of fun hearing the back and forth with you and Whit, and just super excited to kind of bring people together and share this really helpful information. So yes, thanks again. And here's our contact us form on our website, for you to reach out to us. And yeah, let's keep talking, and join us next month for our next session, which will be at the end of April. So
Thank you.
thank you.